Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour and next is our chaplain, Father Sam Keys, and we're going to do Ask a Priest. If you have a question that you'd like to ask a Catholic priest, whether you're Catholic or not, you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884. Maybe it's one of those, I've always wanted to ask a Catholic priest things, and if that's the case, that is welcome. Or maybe there's a particular pastoral or prayer or family or theological problem or question that you've got that you'd like to ask Father about. 888-318-7884. Father Sam Keys is a former Anglican priest, now a priest of the Ordinariate, which I'll let him explain in a second. And he's our chaplain in addition to doing about 13 other jobs, and he's married and he has 5 kids. Welcome, Father Sam Keys.
Thanks, Cy.
How did I do?
You did great. You did great. It's been a month since I've been on, so, you had every right to forget the whole thing,
Well, you want to explain the Ordinariate to people, or should we wait and just hold that in?
Sure. I mean, I guess we haven't explained it in what,
well, you haven't been on in a month. We don't do it when you're not here.
Right. Look, it's like a diocese which was set up by Pope Benedict in an apostolic constitution called Anglicanorum Cedibus, but it's a diocese basically that was set up for former Anglicans and other Protestants coming into the full communion of the Catholic Church, and we have our own missal and kind of an ability to retain certain little elements of what Pope Benedict referred to as the Anglican patrimony, and some sort of liturgical differences, some pastoral differences, but effectively it's like a personal diocese, and we have personal parishes, and that's, I don't know.
And we get, and you have celebrated various forms of the liturgy here with us, but generally we get the Ordinariate.
Yeah, it's called the Divine Worship Missal, and it is one of the. It's a form of the Roman Rite. It's not a different rite. It is the Roman Rite. It's just a different kind of variation of it from, what's, I guess normally we would still call it the ordinary form. It sounds really close to the Ordinariate form. Just a little syllable, right? Ordinary versus Ordinariate. Although that language of ordinary and extraordinary, that comes from Pope Benedict, and that's kind of fallen out of fashion. It's a use or a form or something along those lines.
I really, among the many things I like about it, I love that I get to talk fancy.
You get to talk fancy to God.
I get to talk fancy to God. Yeah, and I like talking fancy to God. When you say, "Therefore, let us keep the feast," in it and stuff like that. We don't have that stuff in the ordinary form of the Mass.
Well,
it's a high it is meet and right so to do, rather than the way. How do we say it in the ordinary?
Yeah, it is meet and it is right and just.
It is right and just, which is fine. It is right and just. But to say it is meet and right so to do.
Justum est. In Latin. Just say it in Latin. That's easier. But. And sometimes you see it's interesting here because we use we do the Liturgy of the Hours. We actually use the Mundelein Psalter for lauds and vespers here in the office, and sometimes it's an interesting contrast because sometimes maybe we'll be singing one of the psalms in the kind of ordinary form, of the office at lauds, and then like a few minutes later, we're saying the same song and a psalm in a totally different translation.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of interesting. Sometimes it's kind of jarring, but other times it's a kind of great experience of the kind of range and diversity of Catholic worship.
But I don't think it's a silly impulse to want to talk fancy to God. I don't think so, Father. I realize that that's not elevated language. Someone else would have some fancier way of saying it. But there's something about the these and the thys that actually helps you feel we're not doing an ordinary everyday thing here. We're doing something special here.
That's right. And it's not just elevated language. It's also more intimate language. That's of course in English. I think sometimes that's a surprise when you realize that thee and thou, right? That's not the more formal actually that's the more intimate form. I mean, that's equivalent to, in Romance languages, like in French, the tu, as opposed to vous, where it's just a more familial kind of form of address, and that's something that we've retained in that hieratic English that we have in our Missal, and arguably, the Latin of the Roman Rite in general is not vernacular Latin. I mean,
it's
there are
higher
people
Latin.
who've kind of written about this, but the I think sometimes people think, it was the vernacular at the time. Well,
not exactly.
It's not exactly.
That's interesting.
I mean, if you look at the Roman canon itself, it's full of kind of archaic language, even in Latin, and kind of repetitive language, and that it's not ordinary speech. So I think Catholic liturgy, going way back, has always had this instinct to talk differently, right, when we're talking to God.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you can't, speak kind of directly from the heart, so to speak. But
no,
but
of
at
course
least in
not.
terms of the public worship of the church, that's a really deeply ingrained instinct, I think, in Catholic culture, going back to the very beginning, and I think, I mean, there are a lot of reasons for it, but one of them is to form us, I think, and in our and that, so that personal prayer then is further formed and elevated, and it leads us into virtue, hopefully.
The other thing I really like in this form, in the ordinary use, is frankly how humble the language is in regard to our inner change with God. That is, where we speak to God in a very humble way. I love the prayer of humble access. I wish we had that in the ordinary form of the Mass or in the Latin Rite. It's just really great. You're about to receive communion, and we do not presume to come to this thy table. It's a lovely prayer. I think people should read it if you haven't read it. It's a good one to pray inwardly anytime that you're approaching Christ in the Eucharist. But and I also like the part where we say, in English, in the ordinary form, we say, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed, which is higher than what we used to say 15 years ago. But when you say it in the kind of King James English and you repeat it 3 times, it does prepare you for...
Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldst come under my roof, but speak the word only and my soul shall be healed. It's some of it, and in the second phrase, it's just a slight word order, right?
Yeah,
it's a little different,
Right, but I don't know, because
it trips me out. Believe me, when I go into kind of ordinary parishes, and which is not that often, but I have to really kind of look at the words and make sure.
Well, that's the thing that happens at Mass too, though. Like if you're celebrating the Mass, and I got to say thee and thy, and what do you say with your spirit, and we say with thy spirit, we say you have to say thy, and like if you're kind of praying and you're not attending, then I always say and with your spirit, and then I feel dumb with all the people around me saying thy. But so you got to keep all that straight. But it is really beautiful, Father, and I'm glad we always get a chance to talk about it when you're on. The number is 888-318-7884. It's Ask a Priest. You can ask Father Sam Keys whatever you like. We're happy when you call, and we're happy to take your call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're a Christian or not. Whether you like Catholic stuff or don't like Catholic stuff or not sure about it all, anybody's welcome to call 888-318-7884. Before we go to the first break, I'm going to go to Ansley. I met Ansley yesterday in Charleston, South Carolina. Ansley, thank you for calling back. You there with us?
Yes.
And I remember yesterday you were 10. Are you still 10, or have you had a birthday in between?
My birthday's in March. So.
Okay, so you're still 10 again today.
Yes.
Do you have a question for Father Keys?
Yes. So, can your guardian angel speak to you, and what are they like? And can you become one?
Okay, well...
No, you just threw that last one on there. You thought of that right when you were talking, didn't you, Ansley?
Okay, well, that second question, can you become one? The answer is definitely no, because you're not an angel. You're a human being, and angels it's a totally different order of being. I mean, it's like saying, can you become a mouse or something? I mean, it's just a totally different kind of created being. And people don't become angels when they die. I mean, that's a kind of common misconception. I don't know where it comes from, honestly. But
that we become angels?
Actually, no, I know where it comes from. It's because Jesus says at one point that we will be like the angels, but he's referring to marriage. But anyway, we don't become angels. Your question about guardian angels, though, I think it's theoretically possible for an angel to manifest in a physical way and to speak to people, right? We have examples all over Scripture of angels speaking to people, especially in the New Testament. Gabriel appears to Mary, he appears to Joseph. There's examples of the Old Testament as well. So it's possible, right? But it's unusual. I mean, and that's not something that you should expect. For the most part, people, I think, I'm certainly not an expert on guardian angels. I know that there's, there are those who have a very specific kind of devotion to their guardian angels, and I think that's a beautiful thing. In fact, I'll tell you right now, my 5-year-old, every night before bed, he wants to say the guardian angel prayer several times. I don't know what it is, but that's his
he's connecting with
that. He really likes that right now. But I think it's possible, but it's not. Again, it's not something you should expect, and it's not the kind of normal course of things. If that makes sense.
Does that make sense, Ansley?
Yes, just like I was talking about yesterday. Related book, Under Angel's Wings, C.C. Coney.
Man, you are really something. Are you going to recommend a book every time you call us?
Probably. And my next one is about the sign of the cross, and then after that, a scientist proves God exists. I just love reading books about that kind of stuff.
Wow, awesome.
Wow, I was the same way when I was 10. I can't deceive you.
That's probably you got another maybe 12 years or something. You can hire him as apologist.
Yeah, you can be the host of Catholic Answers Live. Yeah. Thanks, Ansley. Thanks for calling us.
Thank you.
I might call you tomorrow night, so expect a call, maybe.
All right, we'll be looking out for the phone number, or if your phone number comes up on the machine, we'll be looking for it. See you, Ansley. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Ask a Priest with Father Sam Keys right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
It is a tremendous privilege to be able to speak to so many of you and to know that so many of you are listening to the answers which we want to give you so that you can know the truth of Jesus and come to love Him more.
EWTN Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa. Tonight, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Father Sam Keys is our guest, and it's Ask a Priest. If you got a question that's appropriate for a Catholic priest, we'd love to have your call, 888-318-7884. Going to Rockville, Maryland next, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Anna in Rockville, Maryland. Anna, thank you very much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father Keys.
Hi. So I have a friend who is a bit confused with the idea of how God permits evil, but He doesn't create it. And so I was trying to explain to him how permitting evil is not the same as creating evil. And so I was wondering if you could give me like a better explanation for that to help my friend understand that.
Okay. Can you?
Yeah, I can certainly attempt. I mean, this is a really, this is the question, right, of theodicy, of kind of understanding the nature of evil. And first of all, I think the reason why we insist that God doesn't create evil is because evil isn't a thing. So it's not something that, it's not a creature, right? It's not a created thing. It's not a created substance in the way that you or I or a table or a block of ice or whatever, what have you, or even an idea. I think of an abstract thing as a created thing. It's not like that. Evil is fundamentally a privation of the good, or it's corruption of the good, or the absence of the good. So it has a kind of parasitic relationship with the good, and so it's not the opposite of good in any meaningful way, and so it can't be created. It is, however, it is something that results from free will, which is to say, if you think about Adam and Eve and the garden in this way, that it's not. I mean, you can talk about them choosing evil, right? But in another way, what they're doing is they're choosing an alternative good, which is a disordered good. I mean, that's actually how very often we sin. It's not. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who who say, I'm going to choose, corruption and nothingness and, and non-existence and kind of in that kind of philosophical way. No, I mean, often we're choosing a good which is a lesser good, and we're kind of substituting it for a higher good. And so the kind of first sin is, this is one way of thinking about it, that it's Adam and Eve choosing their own good and their own kind of definition of good over what is given by God. So that possibility of making a choice against God and God's good is just something that's embedded in free will, and God allows it because He allows free will. I mean, this is God's will in creation is that we, as His creatures who are created in His image, that we would also have free will, and which I think. I'll just throw in this qualification that the Catholic understanding of freedom is not a kind of indifferent freedom to just choose whatever. It's ultimately the freedom for the good. So that's the freedom that God, ultimately intends for us. But it's the kind of more conventional sense of freedom of just having a choice. I mean, that plays into it as well. In that, God doesn't coerce us, right? God doesn't want to coerce us, and for God to take away that option, right, of not choosing Him or not choosing the good, would be to coerce us, right? It would be to force us, and ultimately, what we'd have to say is that would be to change the nature of humanity, and in fact to, in some sense, destroy the fabric of creation as God has made it and as God has intended it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to ask any kind of follow-up questions. I don't know if that really helps your friends directly. But that's how I understand the difference between God allowing evil and God, making it, right? It's a permissive will, but it's a permissive will that's tied to His, you could kind of think about it as a higher order will of just His will for our freedom, right? That will cannot be thwarted, and that's why He has to permit evil.
Anna, what do you think?
Thank you very much. That actually helps a lot, because I kind of have like a general understanding, but it definitely, I'm going to try and keep those points in mind next time that I talk to them. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. All the lines full right now. It's Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is our own chaplain, Father Sam Keys, and we go next right here to California. Ryan, watching on YouTube here in California. Ryan, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hello. So I am currently a Protestant, and I've spent about the last 8 or 9 months looking into Catholicism, and so far I'm at a point where most of the dogmas are pretty reasonable.
Nice.
Although I can't be 100% sure until one piece fits in, and that's the papacy.
Okay.
That's what would change my mind on the rest of the issues. The issue is, I've recently watched some videos on this, and I've heard critics say that the earlier popes played very little role in the ecumenical councils, and I've even seen church father quotes that seem to undermine the authority of the pope. And I was wondering what's the most convincing evidence in support of the papacy in light of, these concerns.
Well, we probably should send you a book. Not to, I'm gonna. Don't worry, I'm gonna say something, but I feel like we have some good resources there to share with you about the papacy.
You thinking of Pope Peter?
Yeah,
the book by,
I think so.
We have a book called Pope Peter Defending the Church's Most Distinctive Doctrine in a Time of Crisis by Joe Heschmeyer, and lots of people love this book. Much to my chagrin, lots of people love this book. So we'll send you that. So hang on.
Yeah.
Whenever you and Father are done, don't go anywhere, and we'll make sure you get that book. But go ahead, Father.
Okay. So as to the ecumenical councils, I mean, this is an interesting problem, and it is a real problem, because I mean, if you read the ecumenical councils, very often the first 7 ecumenical councils of the first millennium, which are recognized as the ecumenical councils by the Catholic Church, but in some cases there's really hardly anyone there from the Latin West, much less the Pope. There are some cases where the Pope is, consulted and sends a representative, and then there are other cases where, the Pope, kind of ratifies the synod after the fact, and in a certain sense, and kind of recognizes it as having kind of a binding ecumenical authority. So I'm not sure that I can answer all the things, because the kind of issues with each council are a little bit different. But I can give you one example, the one that I guess sticks in my mind from my reading of those councils, and that's the Fourth Ecumenical Council, the Council of Chalcedon in 451. And in that council, the Pope isn't there, right? It's Pope St. Leo the Great. And there's a famous kind of letter from Pope Leo called the Tome of Leo, which is read aloud at the council, and provides really the kind of turning point in the argument. I mean, I think, who knows how things would have gone without that, but in effect, this is this kind of definitive word on the matter of the kind of you can describe all those councils as a sort of aftermath of Arianism, but in the immediate issue, we're dealing with kind of Nestorianism and then Monophysitism leading up to Chalcedon. And Pope Leo's words are accepted by the council, and in fact, I love how the council fathers respond, and you can see it in the Acts of the Council, which we have extant, and they say, Peter has spoken through Leo, and I'm not going to get the language exactly right, but it's this kind of moment of like celebration and joy almost, that thank God that we have Peter to speak to us through Leo, to kind of settle this matter, right? And you see that in a couple of other moments there in the early councils. So I think, when it comes to the doctrine of the papacy, I do think that I have to read that from the standpoint of the development of doctrine. In other words, the kind of full-on understanding of that we have of of the Pope as the vicar of. Even some of the language like vicar of Christ. That's just not something that's used right away. And I think the kind of specific nature of the role and the understanding of the Church of that is something that develops over time. So I think it's natural that it's not quite as clear in some of those early councils, especially, again, the councils which are frankly, kind of a little farther away from Rome itself, and closer to the new Rome, which is Constantinople. But I also think that it's not hard to see those as being compatible with how the doctrine of the papacy develops. So anyway, I encourage you to keep reading and thinking about that. But they're good questions, and I do think that it can be a challenge to read the early councils with those questions in mind. But I do think that there are satisfactory, rational ways of thinking about it in each of those cases.
Ryan, that brings us right to the break. You can probably hear the music. If you hang on, we'd love to send you a copy of Pope Peter. Defending the Church's most distinctive doctrine in a time of crisis. And call again, because if you're that close, we'd like to keep help answering questions if we can. The number's 888-318-7884. We continue.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with why we're pro-life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
As a child, the great theologian Thomas Aquinas asked, "What is God?" Best-selling author Kevin Vost's new book follows the mature thought of Aquinas in answering that question. In clear and approachable fashion, What is God examines God's attributes and considers questions about him that have vexed mankind for centuries. Order your copy of What is God today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. We bring you the truth of the Catholic faith on Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Willkommen back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your multilingual host. That is, I can say welcome in like 4 different languages. And I'm pretty sure in one of them I pronounce it correctly. It's time for that part of the program that happens from time to time, and it's always a delight when it does. It's time for Thomas the TikTok Engine. Thomas brings us a question from TikTok, and then he gets an answer, and then he goes back to TikTok and posts it there, and probably all of our computers are compromised because of it. Thomas, the TikTok Engine, go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Buenos dias, Señor Kellett.
Oh, well, thank you for greeting me in Spanish.
Thank you for having me here.
No, I didn't realize it. I wasn't ready. Sorry, you got to.
I wasn't ready for your Willkommen, but I recovered very quickly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is a multilingual show. Lingual show.
That's right.
All right, vámonos.
Let's go. So, Father, this question I got from someone on TikTok. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, but I thought it'd be good for Ask a Priest. They wanted to know, why can only a bishop or ordained priest perform an exorcism?
Okay, interesting question. Do I have a time limit for that? Since it's
you have a time limit for all the questions.
Oh, okay.
It's a radio program.
Your time limit is 5 p.m.
Okay, so let's talk about the different types of exorcism real quick. So because there are, depends on who you ask, but there's so-called minor exorcisms or lesser exorcisms, which are one other piece of vocabulary you might hear is deprecatory as opposed to imprecatory, right? So what that means is you are asking for the help of God or the saints to, free you or some place or something from, demonic influences, etc. Those are not restricted, and in fact, they're not properly so-called exorcisms. And so you can find various prayers, sometimes under that category of deliverance prayers, for the laity. Now, so-called major exorcism, or I think in the older term it would be solemn exorcism, is an imprecatory prayer, which means it is a direct address to a demon, by the person doing the exorcism, rebuking the demon and telling them to, commanding them, right? It's a prayer of command, and you can. There's always that very direct language, okay, and that is something that I would say that fundamentally it's not a sort of absolute point of doctrine in that. You can see examples in history of the saints, right? I mean, yesterday we celebrated St. Anthony of Egypt, of the desert, who's famous for fighting the demons, right? And commanding the demons, right? He's not ordained. Right? He's just a super holy ascetic monk who goes out and lives in the desert, right? So it's not a kind of ontological possibility. Largely, this is, I think, in terms of the church's discipline, and again, there's reasons for that I'll try to explain. In the church's discipline, major exorcism is limited to those to priests and bishops, and not just to priests in general, but to priests who are specifically authorized by the local ordinary to perform these exorcisms. I think the reason why there's a pastoral side to it, which is just that this is serious stuff, and we don't want just anyone getting into it. And if you look at the rite itself, it's very clear. Even the bishop should be very, very careful about which priest he selects. It should be someone who's I think it even used the term mature years, right? In other words, it shouldn't be some 30-year-old whippersnapper, who just came out of seminary wanting to slay the demons, right? It needs to be somebody who is.
How old are you, Thomas? Just so I know.
Not old enough for that, sadly.
You're younger than a 30-year-old whippersnapper.
I'm less than a whippersnapper, man. I'm
just a whipper.
And it needs to be somebody who's holy, who is kind of well known for leading a moral life. And you can think about that from practical reasons. I mean, if you get into a one-to-one battle with a demon, I mean, what if the demon starts being well, hey, Father, what about this thing that you did yesterday? I mean, that's kind of dangerous territory, right? I mean, so it needs to be somebody who really is very upright and has a good kind of moral standing to do that. I think that the other reason why it needs to be somebody in holy orders is just that what you're doing by commanding the demons, you're exercising a ministry which is specifically delegated by Christ to the apostles. So if you think about, there's a passage, actually I think it comes in the Gospel tomorrow in our reading, where it talks about how Jesus gave the apostles authority to cast out demons, right? So the church recognizes that is a specific kind of delegated authority to the apostles and their successors, which can then be further delegated to priests. Why is that? I mean, I think there's a kind of an additional reason, I guess, that I'll throw in there, which is just that by commanding demons in the name of Jesus, you're exercising the ministry of Jesus. And so priests, by virtue of their ordination, they are ontologically configured to Christ in a unique way. Again, that doesn't mean they're necessarily holy, right? But it does mean there's on a kind of very deep metaphysical level, they are configured to Christ. And so I think the church sort of understands that it's fitting, therefore, that they be the ordinary, ministers of this particular activity, in which they are commanding demons on behalf of Christ. So. Yeah, there's a few different answers, but hopefully that gets to the core of it.
Thank you, Thomas.
It sounds like the heart of the matter is that this is a lot more serious than you might think it is. Even watching Hollywood movies, The Exorcist and stuff, might not quite convey just how deep of waters you're getting yourself into when this. And so you want to send out your most salty, battle-hardened people out there.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Right. That makes sense. All right, thanks, Father.
No whippersnappers there.
No,
we interviewed an exorcist.
I feel like just saying that dates me.
What, whippersnapper?
Way, yeah.
Oh, really? Do you think so, Father? Do you think so? Do you ride a funicular train,
Well,
Father?
I don't know. That might be a term that's in the Rituale. It says,
whippersnapper?
No,
I don't think so. I was going to tell Thomas, when we interviewed exorcist, Father Lambert, I think is his last name, Father Lambert, he was just such a peaceful person and not dramatic at all. And at one point, the conversation turned to, what do you do if the person undergoing the exorcism starts levitating? And he said, what he had seen the exorcist that taught him do is just gently put your hand on the person's head and push them back down. And just focus on the prayers. And then I was like, nah, I'm not an exorcist. I am not cut out for that. No, there's no way. I'm just gently pushing. Just relax, gently push down, and continue with your prayers.
I'd be reaching for a new pair of pants.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Gosh, you are a whippersnapper. You are actually a whippersnapper. The number is 888-318-7884. That's Thomas the TikTok Engine. You can check out. Did you not know that's his name? Sorry. Thomas the TikTok Engine? That's what we call him. Mm-hmm. I don't think you believe me right now. Ryan in Midland, Texas is next. Ryan, thanks for waiting. Where's the button? Ryan, go ahead with your question for Father.
Hey, Si, I believe you about the TikTok engine thing.
Well, you've heard it before. You've listened. Now I'm starting to feel like Father doesn't listen to the show.
I just told you.
He gave me the look that said, no, I definitely don't listen to the show. All right. Ryan, thank you. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hey, Father Keys, I wanted to ask you, a Lutheran pastor told me once that Scandinavian Lutherans have apostolic succession that they trace back to Peter. But what I want to know is, has the Vatican ever said that Lutheran holy orders are valid or not?
I'm actually not sure if they have or not. I don't, because here's the thing. I don't think that it was ever quite the same issue as it was with the Anglicans, in that even though the Lutherans, right, they do, at least some Lutherans, I mean, this is part of the complication with Lutherans, because you have some Lutherans who retained the episcopate and then others who didn't. So, you mentioned the Scandinavian Lutherans, which, in other words, like, up in Norway, Sweden, et cetera, and they tended to be more kind of high church, and they retained bishops, whereas like most of the German Lutherans didn't. Then you add to that complication the fact that the Scandinavian Lutherans have for a while had kind of formal relationships with the Church of England, and also maybe with the old Catholics, right? So some of the Catholics which broke apart from the union of the Church after Vatican I in Northern Europe. So it's a bit of a complicated situation. I am not aware of a kind of formal declaration about Lutheran orders. I think that in general, I mean, I know that, like, practically speaking, that the Catholic Church doesn't recognize them, but I'm not aware of a kind of particular investigation into that was done that's parallel to the process that Leo XIII instituted vis-a-vis the Anglican Church. So I could be wrong about that, but it may be simply that the question hasn't ever, I'm sure the question has come up, but like I don't know that it has come up with the kind of force that it did within Anglicanism for whatever reason.
And we'll have to leave it there, Ryan. Thank you for your support and your belief in me. We got to take a quick break, however, so we'll do the break, and we'll be right back with more Ask a Priest with Father Sam Keys on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm continually amazed and humbled at the way God can work through me to help so many people. Although I have no idea what the caller's questions will be that day, I trust that the Holy Spirit can use my education and experience to guide, challenge, or comfort those who call.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Bienvenidos back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and our guest is Father Sam Keys, our beloved chaplain here. Beloved to us, but also beloved to a growing family of 5 beautiful children. Maybe they are watching, so I will now wave into the camera and say, hello, Keys children. I hope you are doing well, and I hope you enjoyed your Christmas presents.
Listen to your mother.
And listen to your mom. I'm sorry, I should have started with that. 888-318-7884 is the number here. 888-318-7884. Going to our friend Steve in Napomo, California now, watching on YouTube. Always a pleasure when you call. Wait, is Steve there? I got him on line 3 here. And I was all excited to talk with Steve, and now I messed up. Sorry. We'll talk to you soon, Steve. Mark, we'll go to Mark in Texas then, listening to EWTN on Channel 130. Sirius XM satellite radio. Mark seems to be there. So, Mark, are you there? Hello, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Very well. Thank you, Mark. Go ahead with your question for Father.
First of all, your previous caller, if I may, real quickly, about exorcism. I read a great book recently by a secular journalist named Matt Baglio, Baglio, called The Rite, who researched exorcism as an AP journalist, which I think is a very good book on myth versus reality. So it's a really good read for your previous caller.
Did they make a movie out of that book?
The other thing I wanted to...
That was the name of a movie, The Rite.
Remember Anthony Hopkins? They made that movie.
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah, right. I think a lot of exorcists thought that was pretty accurate.
The book is nothing. The book is not that... The book, like most movies, is not that... It's not the same.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Needless to say, it's a fairly rigorous school that, as you all know, an archbishop pretty much has to select somebody and go through that whole process. But anyway, for your previous caller, it's a great resource. It's not scary. It's not levitating. It's what really happens in speaking to exorcists, etc. But anyway, my question today is, I'm a returning Catholic. Praise be God. Thanks to Scott Hahn and some other people.
Beautiful.
Yep. And I'm very, very frustrated with the annulment process, and here's why. I've been going through it for about a year now, and it's gut-wrenching, it's very personal, and it's been a cathartic process from that perspective. A little PTSD involved as well, I might add, but what frustrates me is I go to a fairly large church, I won't say which one, and when I see the confession lines before Mass, and then I see the communion lines, I think I'm pretty accurate in saying that most people don't go to confession very often. So if they're going to communion with mortal sin on their soul, and they're not being warned about that, think about what it's like for me to sit there and not be able to go and receive the sacrament, because I was a Catholic at one time before I left. And I'm going, wait a minute. I'm sitting here, and I'm okay with it because I do spiritual communion at times, but I'm sitting there watching hundreds of people go to almost check the box communion for some of them, and I hate saying that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't right. Should the priest be warning people before they go to communion that you need to go to confession? I know it's at least once a year, and according to other people, whether you buy the Fatima messages or not. It could be First Saturdays, but can you see how frustrating that is for someone going through an annulment, Father? I think that's not hypocrisy, but it's a lack of clarity by the priests, the bishops, etc., to tell people, like you hear sometimes at a Catholic wedding, listen, we believe in real presence, we believe in this, and if you're not Catholic, but I see my own parishioners going, and I know our priest is gently chiding them to go to confession, and I sit there in my head going, are they receiving communion with mortal sin on their soul unknowingly? And I'll hang up and listen.
Hold on. I want to ask. Just want to ask. I mean, I don't want you to go and. Oh, he did hang up.
He just said, "I'm going to hang up and listen," and he hung up.
Okay, well, because I was going to ask about like his situation, because I don't know. The fact that somebody is going through an annulment process, that in itself doesn't mean that you can't go to communion, right? I mean, the thing that prevents you from going to communion is living in a kind of active place. So, I don't know, maybe it's that he, had a divorce, and he's married right now, but he's not married in the eyes of the church, and so there's that. Maybe that's it. I mean, even there, I think there's, if you can in good conscience commit to kind of during this period of waiting, to live as, brother and sister with the person, the woman that you're civilly married to. I mean, there's an opportunity there to go back to the sacraments, I think, in good conscience. But anyway, that's something to kind of work out with your own, confessor or pastor. Look, it's a scandal. I mean, it's like one of these things where I wish I could sort of make it better, but the fact is, there are a lot of Catholics who treat the sacrament as their own kind of personal little, Pez dispenser, where they just kind of are owed this little like bit of Jesus every week and don't really think anything of it, and that's horrible. Like that's not good. That it seems kind of obvious that that's the case for people. However, but that doesn't mean that you actually know people's consciences, right? So I think the biggest challenge and maybe the thing that I would really encourage you towards is just to kind of try to grow in love and charity towards those people. And if you find yourself kind of feeling resentful or angry or whatever, pray for them, while you are there. And offering these kind of sacrifices that you are offering, pray for these people. Maybe they go to confession elsewhere. I don't know. But I do think that the kind of seriousness of the sacraments, it is an ongoing issue in the life of the church. And I think that on some level our bishops understand that, which is why we have this whole big Eucharistic revival thing, right, that the bishops are promoting in the United States right now. So they're working at it. Whether it's going to kind of work long term, who's to say? I certainly wish it well, and I think that we should support those efforts as much as we can. But beyond that, I'm not really sure what there is to say, because it's a matter of, I think every priest certainly should encourage people to go to confession. They should encourage people to recognize the seriousness of Holy Communion. That's not something you should approach lightly. But, beyond that, you can't control people, especially the masses, right? It's one thing if it's like a famous person, but that's a different, kind of can of worms.
Right. But I, as you said, the frustration is quite understandable, and this whole thing about Eucharistic coherence that the bishops are trying to do is meant to help.
It is.
Man, just even the basic understanding of Christianity, even among Christians, has just collapsed in recent decades. I just don't think people know what they're doing.
I think for many of it, and this kind of cuts across a lot of different issues of the church, right? It's really hard if you are a very kind of sincere, pious Catholic. You're kind of trying to be faithful to Catholic teaching. Even when it's hard, I think of somebody who, for example. This is maybe kind of a low-hanging fruit, right? But somebody who experiences same-sex attraction and is trying to be faithful to the church's understanding of human sexuality, and that's a sacrifice for them. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a burden that they have to bear. And so to kind of live that life and then to kind of turn around and see these kind of prominent Catholic figures being like, oh, it's fine, no big deal, love is love. Like, that's really frustrating.
Yeah. I see that.
But that is just, I think that type of scandal, I think as long as the Lord tarries and we are in this world and the church is full of sinners, this is just part of the kind of reality that we have to learn to deal with.
Yeah.
And
Jesus had to imagine what Jesus had to deal with. Right. I mean, people talking back to him and not, like dismissing. And here's the Lord God come among us as a man, and people are misbehaving all around him. And he didn't go, well, why do I have to behave?
No, I mean, so I think we can certainly seek to model the Lord's own patience, and to again love people and try to be patient. And understand that we can't control everything.
I would go back to you for the conversation, but you hung up. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope that you do find peace in that answer, or at least find some help moving towards that kind of peace. It's not a perfect world, that's for sure. Sean in Port Perry, Canada, listening on the. I don't want to say it, but I got to say it. Alexa, Sean, I haven't talked to you in a long time. Welcome back.
Hello, Cy. Hello, Father Sam. Cy, I want to add to your linguistic abilities by letting you know, if you're not already aware, that the traditional way of greeting someone in Irish Gaelic is Dias Madagat, which means, may God and Mary be with you. And the reply is Dias Madagat e Pwareg, which means, may God, Mary, and Patrick be with you.
What a beautiful, those are beautiful greetings.
I'm going to test you on that next time.
Yeah, next time, right. And then Sean will be listening and he'll call up and go, I don't even know what that jumble of syllables you just made was. Sounded like Czechoslovakian to me.
I do have a question for Father Sam, and it's an issue that we've spoken about previously, and I'm just wondering if there are any developments, and that is specifically in reference to the fact that the liturgical texts for the ordinariate have been long out of print, and used copies of them are selling for exorbitant prices on the internet. I was just looking at the Mundelein Psalter as an example, which Father referred to earlier in the program, and hundreds of dollars for a used copy.
Well, that's not an ordinariate book. That's just a...
And we've got some of them. We can make some money on this.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Maybe we can sell them all.
Don't say that.
But Sean, I do understand what you're talking about.
Divine Worship, the Missal.
The Missal has been...
I saw being sold for $300 and some odd dollars. When is the ordinariate going to print these books and make them available?
Again, that's... so there was a reprint, I want to say in 2021, there was a brief window, at least. I don't know. The website isn't working right now, so I can't go to the Catholic Truth Society website. But they did have the big missal, the altar missal. They did have it available for a time, and so a bunch of us were like ordering extra copies of it. But that's a big. I mean, that one is just in normal terms, that's like a $500 book or something, because it's a nice missal. I don't know if the study missal ever went back into print, and I do know that there was a note from Chancery in Houston about the what they call the daily the CTS daily missal, which is a kind of classic. It's like your kind of missal that has the readings printed in it. I think it's just for Sundays, but they're thinking about that, but they're kind of asking for people to register the interest with the publisher. So I know that's at least in the works, even if it won't happen right away.
Sean, I'm sorry we don't have a more satisfying answer to you, but there's what we've got. And thanks for the call, but the music's playing, so we have to take our break. We got Father Sam Keys with us next hour, and we've got 3 lines open. So if you're on the line, hang on the line. We're going to get to you in just a couple minutes. And if you haven't called yet, the number's 888-318-7884. Any question that you might have that would be appropriate for a Catholic priest is welcome here. 888-318-7884. And do not feel you have to be Catholic to call. Anybody can call with a pastoral, theological, prayer, or family question. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be here with Father Sam Keys, our chaplain. If you've got a question for our chaplain, well, he's your chaplain this hour. It's Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live, and the number is 888-318-7884. I notice lines filling up, but one line open. 888-318-7884. Thank you for coming back for another hour.
Of course.
Of this. That's all you got for me, of course? Okay. All right. I try to have a conversation here, Father. I want to throw something at you before we go to the phones.
Do it.
I'm reading this thing. It's called from the Survey Center for American Life, which I guess is part of the American Enterprise Institute, neither of which I am very much familiar with. But they did this survey of people's religious practices since the pandemic shutdown of all the churches. They just wanted to ask people who's like going still and who's not going, who's back, and it's not really good news. And I want to just ask you, is that your experience? Or, I mean, I know you have a small community, so maybe it doesn't affect kind of a small, intimate community like that, but it's...
Yeah, well, it does, in that I can tell you the congregation that I have now is small. I mean, I have maybe 15 families or something total in my little ordinary community, and there are a few exceptions, but the congregation as it is now is totally different from the congregation pre-COVID. I mean, it's like...
Is it really?
It's like, I mean, there are a handful of families who are still there, but then there are a lot of other people who just kind of disappeared, and I don't know what happened to them. And I spent about a year after I was first ordained, and I kind of got assigned to this group, and I was going through the list, like making phone calls, sending emails, and a lot. I mean, I don't know. It's weird.
They?
Again, and so I could easily imagine if that was the case for a small community like that like ours, that would be a problem for larger ones, just on a larger scale,
Well, yeah, right. Same problem.
And it's hard because, I mean, around here, we have parishes with like 10,000 families. So,
right.
I mean, they're huge. And so it may take some time, I think, to sort of recognize the full kind of fallout and implications of that, because say, well, I don't know how many families you'd have to lose before somebody starts noticing.
Right.
Because again, in some of these large parishes, like not a lot of people know each other unless they're kind of involved in the same ministry groups, or like they go to the same mass and they sit in the same place, etc. But I do think that it's changed things. And again, I mentioned this a minute ago, but I think that the USCCB's Eucharistic revival efforts, I think that they are a sort of direct response to, wow, maybe I don't know that it's a kind of direct, like, hey, we made all the wrong decisions, but there's a kind of, like, clearly things were not good, maybe even pre-COVID in terms of Eucharistic piety. I mean,
exactly.
There's that famous, Pew study from a few years ago.
But then you take it away.
But then then we basically tell everyone, well, just watch it online,
Yeah, that's a real
and then
counter-witness.
And so there's kind of a lot of kind of work to kind of recover from that, and so I think it's going to take some time.
Yeah, well, let's pray that but one thing they did say about this in this survey is that demographic groups that were in declined way faster since the pandemic. But the demographic groups that weren't in decline,
like in decline from participation,
like say
kind of church stuff,
18 to 25-year-old single women.
Okay,
that's a group that was already not going to church very much. But it just collapsed. And then the groups like 55 to 70-year-old married couples, they are pretty much the same as they were. It's the vulnerable groups that we just lost. And so it's bad news anyway. Well, the number is 888-318-7884. It's Ask a Priest. I just asked a priest. You can ask a priest if you call. I'm going to go to Raymond in Elizabeth, New Jersey, watching on YouTube. You are first up this hour, Raymond. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Father.
No, thank you for taking my call, Father. A couple of observations, and you can chime in whenever you feel the need to. I'm hearing Pope Francis, rightly so, wanting to correct everything that has been perhaps not through Benedict and even through John Paul, taken seriously. I happen to love the Eucharist. I believe in the real presence of Jesus. I'm old enough to understand and to remember that when I went to church, the Mass was in Latin. My observations then were, I didn't understand what was going on. The priest had his back to me. I didn't participate. The only thing I actually participated in was perhaps communion. Everybody else was either sitting there unaware of what was going on or saying their rosary or praying out of a prayer book.
Mm-hmm.
The kerfuffle that's going on right now amazes me because, first of all, you have to think back for centuries. People did not participate in the Eucharist. They didn't know what was going on, especially if it was in Latin. And on top of that, you have, what do you call it? I'm going to stumble here. But you have, Vatican II coming along, which was, I think, wonderful in a lot of ways, which promoted participation. But it seems like that participation that was promoted went a little bit too far.
Mm.
Oh, let's all approach the altar table and sit down and have a meal.
Mm-hmm.
You understand where I'm coming from?
I think so, and I'm not. So, I think it's right, and I have to, I suppose, be careful here to not be in kind of one camper. I mean, in a sense, I'm not like, even though I have a lot of sympathies with people in the kind of traditionalist side of things who, go to the Latin Mass even that, I guess I want to qualify it, right? Because the ordinary form can be celebrated in Latin, and it's still the Mass of Paul VI in Latin. So it's not Latin itself, right? It's a kind of a more complicated picture than that. But that's not my primary world. My primary world is in the ordinariate, where we have a kind of hybrid. As Cy was talking about earlier last hour, our liturgy, for many people, they kind of, it's a kind of common first impression of, hey, this kind of seems like, the Latin Mass in English, or, because, you've kind of retained a lot of the ceremonies, at least in a lot of our churches, right? It looks very similar to an older style Mass, but it's in English. So I kind of live in that world, and so I kind of have sympathies with multiple groups, if you will, here. I do think that your experience of the old Mass pre-council, I think that's important, and I know. Again, I have a lot of sympathy with those who love the Latin Mass, and there are a lot of young people I know who love the Latin Mass, and I think it's too easy to forget that the kind of common experience of it in many places was not. You can talk about the beauty of the rite and the missal itself, but that's not often how it was experienced. Recently, I heard, I think it was Monsignor Charles Pope, who's a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington, was talking about this experience of priests kind of rushing through, and so there were some real problems, So I think it's a real danger for those in the kind of traditionalist movement to imagine some kind of golden age, of Catholic liturgy in like the 1950s or something like that, before it all kind of fell apart. Things were not necessarily great. What's interesting, though, I think, is that so many people who attend the more traditional liturgies today, even though there, of course, you have pockets of people who are kind of angry people on the internet, I guess, let's kind of summarize it as, who maybe make comments about, the Vatican II and so on. But I think many of those Catholics who go to the Latin Mass, they're actually very much Vatican II Catholics in the sense that the way they participate in that Mass, I think, is arguably exactly what the Council Fathers were going for, in that, they are like following along. They know exactly what's going on, right? They're participating really deeply on a spiritual level, and so I think it's kind of worth seeing that as actually also part of the fruit of Vatican II. That there's almost a kind of recovery of a kind of a more reverent and participatory and fruitful way of celebrating even what was old, and which kind of shows that it's not so simple as just kind of tossing out what was old and replacing it with something new. And I do think that that's ultimately what the kind of liturgical vision of Pope Benedict XVI, which is, I think, for good or ill, it's kind of come under fire, right now. But I think what he hoped for ultimately if you think about the two big things that he did liturgically, right, was the kind of opening up of the older Mass, but also the ordinary liturgy, right, that I use. I think he saw this kind of vision of, mutual flourishing and kind of different rites informing each other, and the idea that if we want to kind of have a healthy liturgical culture in the Church, the way to do that is not to kind of force everybody to do the same thing, right? And so there's a kind of approach to reform in which you just kind of go in and you change everything, and you're like, no, now we do it like this, and that it rarely, I think, works very well, either in a traditional direction or in a kind of like reformed direction. So we're in a moment where we're kind of wrestling with this, as a church. And, I think that most of us, whether it's, kind of ordinary priests out there or kind of lay people, it can be hard, right? Because they're, kind of different kind of like groups, that are kind of out there that represent maybe kind of extremes, but I think we have to just kind of weather this current storm and hope that, and know that eventually, right, the Lord governs His Church, and the Mass is the Mass. We still have the Mass available to us in many forms, and so we can certainly be grateful that the sacraments are there, and we can do what we can wherever we are to promote reverence and beauty, and as we were saying a minute ago with the Eucharistic revival, like a kind of seriousness and understanding of the weight of the sacraments. I think that's something that we have to do kind of locally, even while, kind of on a high level, you have different kind of groups, fighting about it. And I wish I could fix all that, right? I can't fix it.
Don't give up, Father. I got to go to the break, though. So, Raymond, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the call. It's Ask a Priest. We've got quite a few folks on the line, at least one line open, however. So if you want to get in the queue, 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
This is Raul Caro, founder of the JP2 Catholic Radio Network. Catholic radio promotes the sense of the personal encounter. A type of encounter found between a radio host and callers helps to soften up the heart and open it up to receive the word, which is the good news. As a result, hearts are transformed and lives are saved because of Catholic radio.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I didn't read the ad today at all. I didn't even we're almost like an hour and a half in, and I haven't even read. If Carrie finds out about this, I'm gonna hear no end of it tomorrow. Less than a week left, just 6 more days. What should you do? Did Carrie really write that? Like he expects me to read that? No wonder I'm not reading the ad. What's the deal? What's so urgent? You've got less than 1 week left to get on over to shop.catholic.com and save big time on hundreds of great Catholic resources. Don't procrastinate. Go over to shop.catholic.com right now and take advantage of the 23 New Year special. Spend $23 or more in our online shop at shop.catholic.com. Enter the promo code New Year at checkout and save 23%. It's that easy. 23% off using the promo code New Year right now at shop.catholic.com. That ad got better as it went. It started out a little clunky, but it got better as it went.
I think you could just say our books are cheaper than eggs.
I don't understand that. Well, are eggs extremely expensive right now?
No, it's just a big joke. They're like eggs. They're not $23, but like they're really. I think it's gotten a little better in the last few days, but yeah, there was a moment
where eggs were just through the roof.
And there's some things that are in really short supply right now, like children's medicine. Still, it's a big issue. Like
wow,
Tylenol.
Eggs and children's medicine are not a big part of my life right now, though. So I miss this.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I miss this.
Yeah,
but I have noticed that everything's more expensive.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I fell over when I got my utility bill. I just fell over.
Yeah.
Well, I'm exaggerating. I didn't actually fall over, but I felt like falling over. I don't want to lie on the air.
Mm-hmm.
But have you seen your utility bill lately? It's crazy.
I got a warning from the gas company.
Did you? Well, don't let that happen. That'll go on your permanent record.
No. The warning that basically said, "Hey, just so you know, like rates are gonna double this month."
So man, a shower less.
But that's California for you. That's the natural gas in California is a big thing. It's getting cheaper apparently elsewhere.
I'm sure.
My in-laws in Maine were saying this.
I cannot even believe what other people pay for the stuff that, like when I find out what they pay in other places, and then I remember what we pay here, I feel very sad. It makes me very sad, Father. Mm-hmm. So maybe eggs are cheap in other places. Sue in Tartan, Massachusetts. Sue, thanks for the call. I hope I said that right. I haven't heard of Tartan, Massachusetts. Is that right, Sue?
It's Taunton.
Oh, Taunton! Oh, I know where Taunton is. Yeah. Oh, okay. So she heard a little more Boston accent than was actually there. She went, she must be saying Tartan. All right. Okay, Sue. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Okay. Father, you were an Episcopal priest, right?
Yes, I was. In Boston for a time, even.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
well,
I was.
Anyway.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. I was. I'm back in. I lived in Boston for a few years. I was at Boston College doing my doctorate, and I served at the Church of the Advent as an Episcopal priest. And that's where I got married, in fact. So, and my first kid was baptized there. So, I have good memories of Boston. And
now he's losing his teeth.
My kid, not me.
No, not you. Yeah, the kid who got baptized is losing his teeth.
yeah. I'm not quite that.
No.
There. Yeah. All right. Anyway, Sue, what's going on?
Yeah. I know that because for many years I was in an Episcopal church. And so anyhow, I love the Anglican rite. I think it's beautiful, and it's so to the point. And what I have difficulty understanding is my friend used to belong to a church in Boston, not the Church of the Advent, but another one there. And so they all decided to leave the Episcopal Church and go into the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, there was a dispensation for this to accept them in. They're under the Catholic Church, but they're allowed to use the Anglican rite. However, it's like they're not supposed to advertise themselves, you know?
Okay.
So people have walked into that church from time to time, and they come a couple times, and then they go and they say, this isn't Catholic.
Oh,
of course,
right.
Because they're using the Anglican use. So they don't want to stay because they don't think it's Catholic. And it's kind of hard to explain to somebody, well, this is the whole story, you know?
Yeah, and it's
I know.
Go ahead, Father.
Yeah, and it's hard to if there's kind of misunderstanding in the local diocese, and I'm familiar with the situation in Boston, right? So I'm kind of tiptoeing around this here, but I know that it's complicated there in terms of the relationship with the diocese, and I don't kind of want to air a lot of that on the radio, but I think if you're in a situation where a lot of local Catholics don't particularly appreciate what you're doing, it can be really easy to have those misunderstandings, right? Because they just don't understand. I mean, I've experienced this even here. I mean, it's not the same, but we had my church. We actually had a Lessons and Carols service at a local diocesan church, and we had a lot of really interesting conversations with people afterwards at the reception, and it's always interesting to me. There were people who are like, oh, that's so interesting. Are you Protestant? And we're like, well, no, we're Catholic. Oh, well, what do you mean? And I think and you maybe sometimes you try to explain, oh, well, we're kind of like, like maybe like the Eastern Rites, the Orthodox, but they're not. And I think the fact is a lot of ordinary Catholics just don't understand the, diversity within the whole, Catholic Church, that there are kind of multiple, multiple rights and multiple kind of jurisdictions, all this kind of stuff. And so for some people like that, it can be a hard thing to explain, especially if you don't have, the kind of explicit support of and kind of recognition of the people that they think are the ordinary Catholics, right? So yeah, I mean, that's a difficult, I know that Boston is difficult for the Ordinariate. There's a kind of complicated hybrid parish there that, there's, before the Ordinariate existed, there was this thing called the Anglican Use, and there were what they called pastoral provision parishes. Most of them are gone now. Most of them are now have been incorporated into the Ordinariate, but not all of them. There's one holdout, and it's there.
Oh, I see.
So it's a diocesan parish, but kind of loosely affiliated with the Ordinariate, and so it's a complicated situation. So, yeah.
Sue, I just want to see, does that satisfy what you wanted to ask Father about?
Yes, but I also want to ask now, I know that Texas has a pretty healthy Ordinariate.
Mm-hmm.
But are there other areas, because where it's growing, and especially where it was allowed in order for these people to come into the church?
Yeah, I mean, so there's some pockets in Texas that have some big Ordinariate communities, and they did get a head start. I mean, that's a place where you had Anglican Use congregations that pre-existed the Ordinariate, that had a kind of long-standing existence as diocesan parishes, and then they were kind of transferred over. And so they brought some of that kind of experience and, frankly, infrastructure with them, and that's one of the benefits of that. There are some other places. I mean, I know there's a handful of ordinary communities in the kind of Washington, D.C., Maryland area. There's here in Southern California, we have a few, but it's kind of, it's pretty scattered. I mean, that's one of the big challenges of what we're doing, right? Just that it's a huge area, and you have to kind of gather people locally, and every local situation is different, So I know, there's a parish recently that, had had a great facility, like in a small town in Georgia, if I'm thinking of the right one, where there was just this building, and I've seen some stories like that in Texas. Whereas like here in Southern California, it's like the real estate is really difficult. So it's frankly a lot harder for us to find a home. We've been kind of, and not just my little congregation, but in a certain sense, all four of the communities in our area are in different stages, right? Some of them are doing really great in terms of numbers, but they're all still kind of trying to figure out this situation of how to have a church, how to have a building, in the local situation.
I got to leave it there. Thanks very much for the call, but you can hear the music playing. We got to take a break. It's Ask a Priest. More questions for our chaplain, Father Sam Keys, right after this on Catholic Answers Live. If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers Live is 25 years old. That's a quarter century helping people come into deeper communion with the Catholic faith. As we move into our second quarter century, please help us reach thousands more by becoming a Society 315 monthly donor. Right now, when you join Society 315 at a monthly giving level of $25 or more, we've added some extra perks to the other great benefits we already offer members. Go to givecatholic.com and choose the monthly option to start your donation.
As a child, the great theologian Thomas Aquinas asked, "What is God?" Best-selling author Kevin Vost's new book follows the mature thought of Aquinas in answering that question. In clear and approachable fashion, What is God examines God's attributes and considers questions about him that have vexed mankind for centuries. Order your copy of What is God today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. We bring you the truth of the Catholic faith on Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Father Sam Keys here with us for Ask a Priest this hour. And if you've got a question, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. I'm going to go to David in Peoria, Illinois next, listening on our website, Catholic.com. David, thank you for the call. Please go ahead with your question for Father Sam Keys.
Thank you for having me. I'm having I'm having trouble thinking straight because of some illness, so if I ramble and get off topic, let me know. But it has to do with prayer.
Okay.
I've been sick for about 11 years now, and on bed rest, and through all the different seasons of it when I couldn't talk or couldn't move or any of that, I was actually really happy. It was some of the happiest times of my life because God was just so close, and he was allowing me to be part of his ministry through prayer in some beautiful ways, and I was so thankful for that it didn't rely upon me or anything like that, but he would just let me participate, and it made me so happy. But recently, the past few months, I don't know how to pray anymore. It's like I can't find the words, and I've been trying to rely on some root prayers like the Rosary, the Our Fathers, and the Jesus Prayer, but my brain, sorry, it's getting hot, but I can't find words a lot of times, and I just try to pray from my heart, but
and that,
I don't know, he's always felt so close that he feels so far, and I don't really know how to process it or do anything with it.
All right, David, let's let Father respond.
Yeah, I think we all go through periods of spiritual dryness in prayer, different stages of life, and it tends to, there's not an absolute rule about this, but it does often kind of ebb and flow, and so it's not surprising to me that after a period that felt very fruitful and where you felt very close to God, that there's a sort of a valley now where you don't feel like that. And I would encourage you to that those those prayers that you're saying, the rote prayers, the Rosary, saying the Jesus Prayer, those aren't lesser prayers. They're I think it's wonderful if you have times in your life where you can have that sense of a kind of deep and intimate prayer life, which is, kind of spontaneous and from the heart, and that it's not kind of merely rely on these kind of structures. That's a beautiful thing. But we don't always have that, and it's not. The fact is, that's kind of one of the reasons why we have things like the Rosary and the Jesus Prayer and Divine Mercy Chaplet. You name it, those kinds of kind of set devotions, because those are meant to be a kind of spiritual anchor for us, that kind of keep us grounded in the fellowship with God. Think about I read recently. I'm blanking on where I read it, but I think it was one of the fathers who was talking about, or no, it was Pseudo Dionysius. I don't know. Anyway, the point was he was talking about prayer and what prayer does, and the kind of image was a kind of rope that's like cast out and and attached to a rock, and if the rock is God, who's much bigger than us, and we're just like in a boat or something out in the kind of waters of this world. When we pull on the rope, which is prayer, it doesn't move God, it doesn't change God, but it does move us closer to God, no matter how, like, even if we're kind of pulling on it kind of weekly, it kind of still, it's that attachment to Him. So, be comforted that, many saints have been in a similar situation to you. I think of, and I know it's not obviously everyone's different, but think of, St. John Paul II, who in his final years, really, really struggled to do basic kind of physical tasks. And I don't know I think a lot of people say that he was, mentally quite sharp, but the fact is, there's a kind of example of suffering, and even I think frustrating suffering for him, and yet still, keeping that faith and keeping the kind of disciplines of prayer that he could. So, stick with the Rosary, stick with those other things. Maybe, I don't know if there are other things like, listening to music that can kind of encourage you towards a more contemplation without words. That's something that you might try when you don't have the words, because you don't need the words, right? You don't need those extra words that are your own to have fellowship with God, because God's there and He wants friendship with you, whether or not you can think of anything to say. So I hope that helps, and God bless you, and for your. I'm amazed actually, and it's an enormous blessing for me, I think, and probably for other people hearing this, to just imagine you lying there and praying, for the world. That's an enormous blessing for the whole church and the world, and grateful for your ministry of prayer in that, because I think that just means so much that you can do that. And so don't be discouraged that maybe is taking a different form now, because it's still possible, whether you feel like it or not, whether you have the words or not. God is still able to use you.
Am I still here?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Part of the part of the problem is I was relying on the root prayers, and I can't. The words get jumbled, so I can't even find those words anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the music is probably a good idea, because sometimes that helps get your brain going. It's easier to follow when there's melody.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah.
I don't. It's hard. I guess it's just I've been trying to pray with more like the yearning of my heart, more without the words, and so that with the music would be very good.
Yeah,
Thank
music,
you.
pictures, if you can find, or ask somebody to, help you find some holy pictures, icons, or images. That's another thing to just hold in front of you and not worry about, not worry too much about the content of it. Just kind of rest, with our Lord.
Amen. David, thank you very, very much for the call. I can assure you many of our listeners praying for you right now, some of them on the internets saying that very thing. It's very gracious of you to call. I hope you will call again. We have to take our quick break. We'll do that and be right back with more Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and I share insights and stories from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Father Sam Keys is our guest. He's our chaplain here at Catholic Answers, and we're very grateful for that. We prayed a rosary every morning for a chaplain before you got here. So you're literally the answer. Did you know that? We had a morning rosary. And,
I knew you had a morning rosary.
No, but it was for and now whoever says the intention for the rosary always throws in, and thanks for the chaplain.
That's nice.
as part of the rosary. We might have other intentions now, but there's always a thanks for the chaplain, which I disagree with, by the way. I'm like, no, I don't disagree with that. Darrell in Houston, Texas, watching on YouTube. You are next, Darrell. We're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hey guys, how you doing? How you doing, Father?
Hello.
A little bit closer to the phone, Darrell. All right.
Yeah. 1 second. Let me do it better. How's this? Is this much better?
Much better. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Great. So I kind of have this thought that in Protestantism there are so many options for ministry work. You can go to Protestant seminary. You can seek higher education, be a professor, and be a youth pastor or a pastor of a church. Just there's like a sky's the limit of what you can do in ministry work in Protestantism. Whereas I feel that in Catholicism, if you're not a priest, there isn't much you can do. It's just a thought. It's like that I have in my head. I could be wrong, but I wanted to kind of get your take on it, Father, or even you, that about like, is this disparity? Is it really real as I think it is? That as a Protestant, you can do so many things, but as a Catholic, if you're not a priest, you're just a lay person, and you really can't do too much in terms of higher learning or like, really deep ministry. You just can't do anything. You just got to be in the pews.
Well,
so I wanted to kind of...
I do think, I'll just answer quite directly. I do think that's a major misconception. But it is a misconception that has, I think, reasons for it. The reason for it is one of Pope Francis's favorite things, clericalism. Just the idea that
it's the opposite of one of his favorite things.
Right, well,
it's one of his favorite things to talk about.
Okay.
Move on.
We'll move on. I don't know. Like, when you talk about clericalism in Rome these days, who knows?
Right.
But in principle, right, it's a problem according to. It's something that Pope Francis complains about, right? That clerical. And I think one of the ways that plays out in the life of the Church, despite all the kind of reforms post Vatican II and stuff like that, there is this kind of persistent idea that to do anything important, you have to be ordained. And that's not what the Church formally thinks at all. There are certain very specific things that are limited to ordained ministry, having to do with the sacraments and the governance of the Church. But there are so many kind of things in apostolic ministry. And actually, so this is part of the thing too. Like, formally speaking, that term ministry is reserved to. People there are different parishes that might refer to things as ministries. Technically speaking, ministry is ordained ministry. Other things we refer to as apostolates or other kinds of maybe vocation, depending on what it is. Frankly, here we are. We're sitting here in Catholic Answers, which is an apostolate. All right, there are no. I'm a priest, right? I'm here in the building, right? But I'm it. It's run by the laity, and this is just kind of one of many examples of things in the Catholic Church that you can do. There are so many, and I know many people who have gone and studied theology or different kind of disciplines related to the Church that lay people who teach in seminary settings, who teach in Catholic universities, and or who run nonprofits, apostolates, different kind of groups, agencies, etc. Even in the parish, right? Your typical Catholic parish, has maybe one priest and then a pretty substantial staff, typically, of lay leaders who are running the kind of educational work of the parish and doing the catechesis of children and adults, who are kind of doing the kind of behind the scenes work in terms of liturgy and music and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's really. I don't think that's a pretty accurate. I don't think that's a very accurate description, and I think we need to kind of work hard to insist that there's valid and good and important work for the laity to do in the Catholic Church, and in a certain sense, the priest. The priesthood is very important in terms of keeping the sacraments. But in some other ways, the priest is just one guy. I don't. I think that the kind of work of the laity is really, really important. And my community is a great example of that. In that, we're kind of in the ordinariate in general, we're kind of running these mission communities, and these things wouldn't function without lay leadership, right? You just the idea that a priest is going to come along and single-handedly build a parish from scratch or something like that. It's just not realistic. And what you have actually are like really excited lay people who see this vision and want to kind of do something about it. And, that could mean, again, in the parish, it could mean a kind of other kind of apostolic work in the world. It could be something academic, social, you name it. I think there's a lot out there.
I have to say, I can testify to that, too, having been a member of the diocesan curia here in San Diego. And when you'd look around the curia table, the bishop is there and the auxiliary bishop is there and a couple of priests, but most diocesan offices are run by lay people. At the time in San Diego, the majority of those were women. And so I say that because the second kind of complaint about Catholics sometimes is that women don't have positions of leadership. Well, that's just not true. Women are all over the leadership of the Catholic Church. It's a certain kind of pastoral leadership that is reserved to priests and bishops. But I'm gonna leave it there. Even though I was really enjoying that conversation and I want to come back to you, I feel bad, Darrell, because every single line is full. So I hope you'll call and talk again, because it really was a good chance for conversation. I'm going to Rich in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Rich, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Please go ahead with your question for Father.
Thank you for taking my call. At the risk of beating a dead horse, I just wanted to offer a couple of quick thoughts on the Latin Mass versus the Novus Ordo and the other rites, and kind of get your take on it. It seems like all the people that are really, like you mentioned, that are earlier in the show about the traditional Latin Mass, they're talking about how reverent it is and how involved everyone is. But I'm wondering, is that because they brought back Latin or those particular rites, or is it because of the passion and interest they're bringing when they go there? Like I went to a Novus Ordo Mass, but it was a lot of it was in Latin. They did the penitential rite in Latin. They did the Our Father in Latin. They did the Lamb of God in Latin. But none of it was chanted or sung. They didn't even sing or chant the responsorial psalm. It was just recited, and the lectors and the priests, couldn't have sounded more bored. So I'm like, if you brought that same lack of energy to a traditional Latin Mass, I think you would end up with a Mass that was just as flat as that Novus Ordo. Whereas if you put your passion into it, you pick the right songs, you have the musicians and the priest learns a little bit of chant. You could do all that stuff inside, the other style of Mass, and I think maybe that's what's really missing.
Yeah, look, there's nothing magical about the 1962 Missal of John the 23rd or any previous missal that somehow makes it so that any Mass according to that celebration is going to, again, kind of automatically be beautiful and well done and reverent and attractive to the faithful. Likewise goes for the Missal of Paul VI, kind of positive and negative, right? I think, none of that gets to the real, and I do think there are legitimate questions, that various people are asking, including myself, about, the character of the reform and whether it actually did what, Vatican II wanted it to do, et cetera, right? But, none of that, I think, excuses us from the real just kind of practical issue of, what are we doing to kind of make a more beautiful and worthy celebration of the Mass wherever we are, and I think we need to avoid being kind of snobby about it, and by that I don't, what I mean by that is very particular, which is just I don't have a lot of patience for the people who it's not just that they love the Latin Mass, but they're very, very exclusive about it. Or, the opposite, the people who just are kind of resentful of anything prior to 1970, as if Catholicism didn't exist before 1970. I think both of those attitudes are really kind of unhelpful. And if hopefully we can kind of agree on the need to just have a reverent and worthy celebration of the Mass, I think there are different kind of ways that we can put our energy into that cause wherever we happen to find ourselves, whether it's in a place that has an older, an older Latin Mass, or the kind of typical ordinary form Mass. So I think that's something we have to take seriously. I don't know if that answers the question.
I'm going to hope it does, because I do want to get some more folks on with you. And I'm very grateful for that question. Brian.
Speed questions.
Speed questions. Brian in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube. Brian, thanks for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Father, I had a question real quick. I used to be a pastor, Protestant. I'm Catholic now. Fully tattooed from the neck down. Can I become a deacon in the Catholic Church?
You'd have to ask your bishop. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Well, there's no law. There's no church law.
I'm not aware. I mean, I am not aware of any particular law. That's definitely not. Tattoos, as far as I know, are certainly not a canonical impediment, at least in the current Code of Canon Law. So I don't think there's anything about that. I mean, I think that's a real particular thing where you just need to approach your local diocese, and I honestly would be kind of shocked if
they bothered about it.
I mean, unless something there is like really obscene or something, but if it's nothing like that, I mean, I doubt that anyone's going to be very bothered by it.
But that is Father began right I'm in the right spot, actually. I mean, this is an issue for bishops. Bishops decide who's a deacon for their diocese. So, are you comfortable with that answer, Brian?
I am. I brought it up to my priest, and he's real edgy about it.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
And that's why I can't get no answers. He's
just call the vocations office of your diocese. Talk to the person for the permanent diaconate, and that's a better approach, I would say. Because
I had a whole vision and a calling from going from Protestant to Catholic. It was an awakening.
Yeah.
And now I feel like my priest saying one thing, I'm like a little turned off now, and I'm like, did I make the right choice?
Yeah.
Oh, because part of your vision of being Catholic was the diaconate?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, on the one hand, obviously, nobody has a right to that. In that, you need, on one level, you need to make your peace about the fact that, just be great that you're Catholic and you have the fullness of the faith and the sacraments and all that. But, you want to offer yourself to the church in this particular way. And I think that's a worthy goal. And so I wouldn't worry too much about, a local priest being edgy about it. I mean, I don't know why that is, but, I would talk to somebody and eventually, yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to go through that without some kind of interaction with your local pastor. But definitely talk to somebody in the diocese and see what they say. And, sometimes the different dioceses, they might have like weekends or kind of days of reflection or things where men who are kind of thinking about this can go and, kind of reflect and do some kind of discernment together. So I would recommend that you pursue that.
Okay, Brian?
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Father.
Brian, we just have a few seconds, so I would say one thing to you, too, because having been on the inside in these diocesan decisions, often they have to do with the needs of the parishes and the needs of the diocese, and that it's not always personal stuff. And so the bishop is looking for a certain thing, and so I wouldn't get too disheartened. I've known many people who felt they had a vocation, and then the diocese said no at a given time, or maybe more than one time. But I wouldn't get too disheartened about it, because it's like a marriage. She's got to be looking for a husband at the same time you're looking for a wife, and that's not always the case. So I hope you'll have some peace about that. Brian, God bless you, and welcome home to the Catholic Church. Father Sam Keys, our beloved chaplain, may we have your blessing before we go?
Of course. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God, and of his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost be amongst you and remain with you always.
Amen. Thank you very much, Father. I really enjoyed these 2 hours. I'm glad you came in for 2 hours. Was it great?
Yeah, it was.
You were comfy?
It was fun.
All right. Very good. Thanks. Tomorrow we got open forum. I know Jimmy will be here, right? Is it both hours, Jimmy? All right, 2 hours, Jimmy Akin, open forum. So I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody today, but if we didn't get to you, give us a call tomorrow, and you can ask your question of Jimmy, and we'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.